Okay. This is the Historic District Commission. The date is November 11th, 2021. Time is 4:14. And we'll take attendance. Darren?
Here.
Darren Walk? Rosina and Ron? Mark Rodanis?
Art's here.
Chris Shea?
Here.
George Clark? George?
Yeah, George's here. I see him. He's on mute, Adam.
He's mute, okay. George, okay. Alyssa Stack is absent. Jim Bohan is absent, but I know he's trying to get on. Hopefully he'll come soon. And I'm Adam Cliver, Commissioner. So tonight we're here. This meeting was noticed in the Fairfield Citizen on Friday, October 29th, 2021. And we're here today to hear a training session by State Historic Preservation Officer Mary Dunn. So welcome, Mary. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to try to share my screen so I can do a little PowerPoint. And also with me, as you know, is Stacey Vero with Preservation Connecticut, formerly Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. Preservation Connecticut was set up by state statute to be a sort of the nonprofit statewide partner of the State Historic Preservation Office. And Stacey is an alum of the State Historic Preservation Office, so she's got a lot of good information to share. So I'm going to jump right in. I know some people have to leave a little early, but as I said, I'm hoping that these slides will just be sort of a springboard for conversation. There's going to be a little bit of refresher and then some actual conversation about situations that you might be seeing right now. And in fact, I think I gave a presentation to your commission just a couple of years ago. So a lot of this might be quite familiar to you already. So I'll kind of.
I think it was on solar panels, right?
That one was last spring, but before the shutdown, before COVID, 2019, I think I did a big one, but I know there might be some new commissioners that would be on board. So anyway, let me get going. Let me hope I can share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. Then let me get going from the beginning. Okay, so here we are, November 8th, a little refresher training, and then hopefully some more in-depth conversation on situations. As you all know, we always like to remind you that you can find a lot of information about how you should administer historic districts in the state statutes, which were actually set up to enable municipalities to have these districts. So 7147 is your Historic District Commission, sort of Bible. And this legislation was set up in the early 1960s to help municipalities decide for themselves what they thought were important cultural resources in their town, either architecturally or historically, and thus were worthy of preservation. And so the ordinance provides, as you know, a means of regulating certain changes to historic properties within that designated historic district. As you know, you should have 5 regular members and 3 alternate members at any time. The statutes recommend that one of the commissioners be a resident of the district that is regulated. Some commissions have more than that, and it's not a requirement, but it's a strong recommendation. And this, of course, is just so that, property owners in the district will feel like they're not that they're not being, told what to do by a bunch of outsiders, that they have a neighbor, on the board that they can talk to. It's important for alternates to be appointed, and it's also important for alternates to attend all the meetings because if they don't know when they're going to be seated, if a regular member can't make it. And so they need to be up to speed on all the business that the commission has been been addressing, so that they don't come in cold to an issue, especially if they need to vote on something. Fairfield is a certified local government. You've been one since, I believe, 1997. And so as such, we like to see at least 2 commissioners have professional expertise in historic preservation or related fields like architecture, archaeology, law, history. But at the very least, every commissioner has to have a demonstrated interest or competence or knowledge of historic preservation. You have to have an affinity for historic preservation because as a certified local government, you've signed a commitment to taking into consideration your historic resources during your planning process. You should have 1 or more expiring terms each year so that you can, so that not everybody's going off the commission at the same time, and a whole brand new commission is coming into place. And the only officers you're required to have are a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. And your primary responsibilities are to establish rules of procedure like any other public body. You do submit an annual report on the commission membership and your activities. This is per state statute. That report goes to me. But as a certified local government, I also send out a separate report that I use to report to the federal government because the certified local government designation is actually a relationship between, it's a partnership between our office and the National Park Service. So they like to know what their CLG commissions are up to as well. And then, of course, your main business is to provide regulations that give guidance to the property owners in your district and make sure they understand what you're considering as they prepare an application for a certificate of appropriateness. It's good that they know what should come before the commission, what doesn't have to come before the commission, and what points of consideration you take when you're reviewing applications. And so we do recommend that you have established design review guidelines, which you do. These are good because they're published. There's no surprises. If the unfortunate happens and you go to court, it's good to have your regulations really publicly known so that you can't be accused of being arbitrary or capricious in your deliberations. The design review guidelines should take into consideration the character defining features of your particular district. We recommend using the Secretary of the Interior standards as a basis, but they're kind of broad and one size fits all. But there are districts in Connecticut that are made up of neighborhoods that were developed in the 1950s, and then districts that were developed in the late 1800s or even the 18th century. So you have to look at what makes your district unique and what would be required to maintain that architectural character. And if as you update your guidelines or if you're introducing new guidelines, it's always a good idea to get input from the property owners. I mean, there are certain things you can and cannot do, but it's good to have buy-in so the property owners have even more of a stake in the successful outcome of your deliberations. And then some commissioners set up blanket approvals to kind of reduce the number of applications for certificates of appropriateness that come in that maybe don't have to come in. And we can talk about that in a little bit. So as I said, there are actually four treatment standards, 4 approaches to the preservation standards. But the rehab standards are the ones that are generally the best to use, or the most flexible, and they provide for easier adaptive reuse of historic properties. And they're a set of recommendations. They'll give you a scenario or a material, and then they'll give you recommendations on how to treat the material and recommendations on what you should not do. But the highlights are that you basically want to retain as much historic character and building fabric as possible, retain and preserve, especially distinctive features, original balustrades on porches, since you review exterior work only, I'm not going to say, plaster medallions in the dining room. but that would be a feature that we would want to see preserved, you know, in general. If there are deteriorated features, of course, we'd rather they be repaired rather than replaced, and replaced in kind if you have to replace them. So if you have wooden windows that just absolutely must be replaced because, you know, they're sawdust or they're missing, we want the property owner to explore replacing them with wood windows. And then, of course, this probably doesn't come up much, but we do want to be careful how we treat historic building materials while we're working on them so we don't cause damage. You know, high pressure power washing a wood, you know, wood siding before you're painting can do a lot of damage, physical damage. It can shred the wood, it can break windows, and it can certainly drive way too much moisture into the wood that would require a long drying out period before you even start to repaint. And so if you paint too quickly before the wood dries out, you're just facing another paint job in another year or so. So, you know, I mentioned blanket approvals. They should be formally adopted by the commission, and, you know, your property owners should know about them. And they should just designate a number of items that don't require a certificate of appropriateness. And they become part of your guidelines. And they usually address, you know, non-permanent changes like window air conditioning unit or the design of a mailbox or something like that. That's not a permanent fixture that can be changed, and really is a matter of taste, not really a matter of, of, of impacting the historic or architectural character of the building. But they have to be items that don't require a building permit, because anything that requires a building permit in the district must have a certificate of appropriateness first, so that the planning department or the building department knows that the work being planned has been approved by the commission. And so, as you know, things that require a COA are building permits to either construct new buildings or alter a building or a structure. And alter has a broad range of definitions in the statutes: change, modify, rebuild, remove, demolish, raise, which to me are basically the same thing, restore, move, or reconstruct. So if you look at the statute, you'll see just exactly what alter means, and it does cover a lot of different types of changes to a building. And then when you're looking at a certificate of appropriateness or the application, as I said before, things to consider are the historical and architectural value and significance of the resource that the work is being done on. What are the significant features that you probably want to see retained? In terms of new construction, you want to make sure that the materials are similar in scale, general texture, compatible materials. You don't want someone to build a replica, you know, of a house from, you know, the late 1700s. You don't want to create a false appearance of historicity, but you do want the new building to be compatible with the district. Its setback is very important too. You need a certificate of appropriateness before you can get a demolition permit, and also parking in historic districts. New parking requires a certificate of appropriateness, even if the reason for the parking is an allowed use. So if you say you own a house and you want to convert it to a daycare center, and so you need extra parking spaces or whatever, even though that use is allowed, you still need to come before the commission to make sure that the parking doesn't have a negative impact on the district. I'm sure you're following the procedures properly. You notice your hearings 5 to 15 days in advance. You need to have a quorum present if you're going to vote on applications, and the approval or denial is by majority vote, simple majority. You do have to take action within 65 days of filing the application, that the application was filed, which means if they file on October 1st and you don't meet until October 17th, 17 days have gone by. You have to take that into account when you're deliberating the application. And if you don't take any action within 65 days, that is an automatic approval of the certificate of appropriateness application. You can approve COAs with stipulation. If someone wants to put a mechanical, let's say a standing air conditioning condenser unit that's really big, you can approve it, and you might ask that owner to screen it with vegetation or a fence or something like that. If you approve solar panels, you can approve them with the stipulation that once the lease is up, if they're leased, that they come down off the house. They don't just stay up forever, even past their useful life. Exemptions from review include paint color. Whenever I do meetings telling people how historic districts, are created, somebody always stands up and talks about, they want to paint their house any color they want, and they can, because this is something that is specifically prohibited in state statute. You don't rule on paint color. And they always bring up Nantucket. Well, and Nantucket does, but Nantucket's not in Connecticut. So you can rest assured that paint color is not regulated. Other exemptions are the portion of the exterior of the structure or building that's not visible from a public street or way. As you know, the very first, maybe not the very first, but in the early paragraphs of the statutes, that is your charge, viewing alterations to exterior architectural features that are visible from a public way. So if they can't be seen, they don't have to come in for a COA. State properties are exempt just because they can't be beholden to the statutes that they created for the benefit of the municipalities. Ordinary maintenance and repair, as long as there's no change in appearance or design or materials, it does not require a COA. If there's a public safety violation certified by the building inspector, the property owner needs to make that alteration to correct it, and that doesn't require a COA. This isn't the case with you, I'm assuming, but if a building permit is issued 5 days before the vote for the new district, that permit is grandfathered in. They don't have to get a COA, even if they haven't started the work yet. And then any property owned by a nonprofit institute of higher education does not need to apply for a certificate of appropriateness. Enforcement by the town is spelled out in state statute as being the job of the zoning enforcement office or the building inspector, or the ordinance itself that the town enacts when they establish the Historic District Commission, that can name another public entity as the enforcement officer. And if there's a violation of a COA or work that's being done without a COA, the remedy is either to have the zoning enforcement officer come out and try to rectify the situation, stop the work and talk to the property owner, have them come in for a certificate of appropriateness. If it has to go to court, it's a superior court action. The zoning enforcement officer has the right to impose daily fines. If the way the statute reads is if the work's being done and maybe the property owner didn't know that they had to come in for COA, you can impose fines of $10 to $100. If it's a willful violation, or even one where the property owner's been told to, cease and desist or, reverse the work, you can act, and property owner doesn't comply, then you can impose fines of $100 to $250. And then, of course, the property owner can appeal a decision by the commission within 15 days if you deny a COA, and that is done in Superior Court as well. And then one thing that I'm pretty sure Fairfield is aware of, but if you do decide to issue a certificate of appropriateness for a demolition in the historic district, you need to notify our office. You just need to let us know that you approve the COA for the structure, and that just provides, it kicks in a 90-day delay automatic within that statute, but it also gives our office a chance to remedy the situation, to find an alternative. We generally don't have the capacity to find a purchaser or remove the building or do other things, but by statute, there is a 90-day delay, and we do need to be informed. If the town wants to, they can abate property taxes for that 90 days, if they anticipate that, being prolonged. And I'm just gonna, well, I'm not gonna close, but I've got just three sort of policy statements that we came out with about 10 years ago. These are not in state statute, these are not law, but these are things that we get a lot of questions about. And so we finally decided to come up with, a paper on it. And the first one is that boundaries do not have donut holes. Everything within the boundary of an historic district is subject to the regulation of the commission. I think a donut hole, if you took one of the properties out, that would sort of be like spot zoning, and that's generally, discouraged. So the boundaries are contiguous. The buildings are contiguous within the boundary, and the boundaries are continuous. They don't like just float off, like at the end of the streets. Everything is encased. We get questions about the dissolution of historic districts. The statutes are silent on this. Because the ordinance was established by your local legislative body, we generally just refer you to your town attorney to decide how an ordinance might be changed or appealed. Our office, after researching the statutes and consulting with the AG, we can't create a process for it. It's municipal enabling legislation, so the municipality needs to figure out how they want to address the dissolution of an historic district. But our office, our stance is that the statutes are silent on it. They probably weren't going to provide for a way to dissolve them. If a local historic district is also part of a national register district, which is often the case, and that local historic district is dissolved, that has no bearing on the national register listing. That does not delist the national register district. And then finally, and this is sort of related to the first one, there's no, like on the National Register, there's contributing resources and non-contributing resources, but in a local district, there's no distinction. If you are in the district, whether your house was built in 1897 or 2007, it's subject to the regulation of the commission. And then, now I'm going to finish. Yes. And if Stacy wants to jump in as well. I just wanted to kind of just go over some of the, popular inquiries that we get here at SHPO. And if you want to jump in, or if you want to pose any additional questions, feel free to, and Stacy and I can field the questions. But a lot of people want to know what a public way is, and that's basically any place that the public is allowed to be, that's not considered trespassing. So, a street, a riverway, it can be the public parking lot next to a building. Again, you should just, run things by your town attorney if there's a real question that's causing controversy. What is a building or a structure? And the statutes define this. A building is a combination of materials that's created to provide shelter for property, humans, pets, equipment. And a structure is a combination of materials that does anything else besides that. It can be a fence. It can be a sculpture. It can be a shed. It can be a playscape. We might debate whether it could be a pool. A pool is a combination of materials affixed to the land. So that's also a question, and we can certainly discuss any specifics that you might be facing. As you know, you do not have jurisdiction over the use of a property. However, if the use of that property necessitates exterior changes to the building, you do have regulatory review authority over those changes that are visible. Roof replacements often raise questions. As I said earlier, if there's no change in design or materials, a roof replacement really should not have to come before the Historic District Commission. except that sometimes people will change the material or change even the pitch of the roof. If they have a flat roof, they might pitch it just a little bit too high. That would change. If it's a modern building, that would definitely, or an Italianate building, that would definitely change the architectural characteristics of the building. So you got to keep an eye on roof replacements. Actually, we did talk about solar panels. Like I gave a little session on those, I think last March, and talked about the sustainability guidelines that the Park Service came out with actually quite a while ago, but they're very good. We get a lot of questions about synthetic or substitute materials, especially for exterior, like delicate features, like a peak screen or a or porch baluster. Because those are very hard to replace in kind if you're going to do the exact design. So it's very it's important to hopefully be a resource for property owners when they need to replace things like that. Reconstruction of new features, or actually, I wonder if that means reconstruction of historic features. If we generally, if someone has photographic evidence that a feature once existed on a house and you think that it's architecturally appropriate to replace that, reconstruct that feature, that's certainly within your purview to do that. And then a lot of questions about fencing. Fencing is specifically listed in the statutes as constituting a structure, and so is subject to review by the commission. Now, landscaping is not subject to review, but it does come into play often when, sort of as I mentioned earlier, you want to use it as a screening for maybe a modern intrusion on the property. The problem is sometimes commissions are advised when they're making a change to a property, like say they want to tear the front porch off, but they've got a whole screen of 50-foot trees in front of it. Sometimes we advise commissioners to actually then kind of pretend that vegetation's not there, because A, that vegetation may not be there forever, and B, it's still making a change to the historic resource that should be reviewed. So those are a few things that we get, but I will I can stop sharing, and if you have some specific questions or anything about the presentation, we can take it from there. And I can make this available, because if you need more information, my contact information and Stacy's contact information is here. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
That was excellent, Mary. Thank you so much.
Good.
Great stuff.
Oh, good. Glad to help. Any questions? Any concerns?
Stacy, do you have anything to add before we?
Sorry, Stacy. I just started talking. I didn't stop. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. I mean, Mary is the authority on all of this. But I just wanted to add that if you do have any specific questions that pop up, you can always contact either of us to help you sort them out. So please do keep that information handy.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Who wants to start? Speak at once.
I'll start if that's okay. Hi,
Sure.
It's great to see you again, Mary and Stacy. Nice to see you. Chris Shea here. I just had a couple of questions on things that have actually come up, and wanted some insight from you. I know we've got situations where we have properties that are in a district and parts of the property are visible from a public way that's not in the district. Like a street that's adjacent to the district, you could see maybe the back of the house, but you're not in the district looking at the back of the house. And I just wanted to confirm that would mean that part of the house would be visible from a public way, even though it's not in the district.
That is my understanding. That is what has been advised over the last 60 years, because yes, this legislation is put in place for the protection of what's within the district, but it is the district as a whole and as it presents to the public. So, as I said earlier, you could be on your boat on the Quinnipiac River, and there's a local district that fronts the river. The river's not part of the district, but that is considered a public way, and so changes that someone can see as they're riding by on their boat are subject to review.
Right. Yeah, we have that same situation with the Southport Harbor into the Southport Historic District. Okay, and then you mentioned like replicating exterior like balusters and things like that, and we do have situations where there are some homes in the district that have installed fiberglass columns, and our specific handbook does not allow for the use of synthetic materials like that. So I don't know how I mean, is that something that we should be enforcing?
If it's, yeah, I mean, if it's part of your guidelines, if it's in your guidelines, then yes, you definitely should. And it's not, I kind of mentioned earlier, it's nice if you can be a resource for your property owners. It's not that you just don't want people. I mean, the material itself may not always be the best choice, and so it's good that the commission is in place to sort of advise the property owners on better alternatives. A fiberglass column that's still sitting like on a wooden porch, that's going to cause problems. When synthetic material comes into contact with the original or the natural material, and they both contract and expand at the same time, or it can cause problems. So for that reason, it's not just a matter of aesthetics; it's a matter of protecting the historic resource. So there's a lot of reasons why and we don't want to say that all substitute materials are bad, but there are reasons why they shouldn't be used. And so it's good that you have those in your guidelines, if for no other reason than to bring the property owner in for a conversation and help guide them. It's still your decision. If you feel that you want to approve it, that's your decision. But hopefully, you can have a conversation that might benefit the resource as well as the property owner. Stacy, you probably have experience in the field with this, or I don't know, do you have any?
Yeah, no, it's always a case by case evaluation, right? So
Right.
if you feel like it's going to have an overall negative impact on the resource, if that person can't use a substitute material that maybe is not so egregious, if it's a minor application of that material, that in the long run would have a better outcome for the building, then again, that's a decision you have to make. And that does happen sometimes. It's just we encourage people generally to always try to use the original materials whenever possible, for the reason that Mary mentioned, because they've been interacting in that way for many years prior. So.
Okay. And I just had two other quick things. I don't want to take up any more time, but just quickly, if you could talk a little bit about lighting in historic districts. It seems to be very subjective, and that's kind of a difficult one for me. I struggle with how to enforce that. I mean, we get some applications that are, very lit up, and it's hard for me to know, what's appropriate. And then the other things kind of along the same lines, but maybe less ability to enforce it, is noise from equipment like air conditioning condensers and pool filters and pool pumps. Oftentimes, in these districts, there's not a lot of space between the pool and the neighbor, and when it's visible from a public way, it's also kind of noisy. And so I'm just wondering, I don't think there's any way to enforce that on a noise basis, but it seems like every house now in a village needs to have a pool, and so it can get kind of noisy. And
Yeah.
I'll stop now. Thank you very much for your presentations.
Yeah, you know, you're right. The commission doesn't really have purview over, noise per se. That might be covered in another statute, in the town of code of ordinances. I was gonna say something else, but it's slipped out of my head. So I'll move on to lighting. I think in that case, if what you're reviewing is the installation of a new street, lamp in the front yard, like a street, I don't think street light, but a light, that is a structure, and so that would come under your review. But I have had questions asking about the light that's coming from within the house that you don't have purview over. It's not an exterior architectural feature. You have to kind of keep that in mind. What you're reviewing is exterior architectural features, and light from within the house is not an exterior feature. Oh, Stacy, did you have anything to add to that? But this comes up with I'm sorry, Stacy, I'm going to ask you, then I'm going to cut you off. This comes up with temporary campaign signs. That's usually covered in another ordinance, the signage ordinance. A permanent sign you would have purview over. But I'm sorry, Stacy, go ahead.
No, I think maybe what you were trying to say at the beginning that and when it slipped away was that you can suggest placement of the equipment to minimize noise. So if it's possible, that might help, by placing it in a different part of the house. But
yeah, that would be a stipulation. Yeah, that
yeah,
you could cover with a COA that you approve. Sure.
Suggested that before. And I kind of have this question for you, Mary, when it's a floodlight, for instance, on a house where it's not a really big architectural feature, but it does impact the neighbors. We've had this question come up and I haven't had a satisfactory answer. So I think that's something that's an interesting problem that I've not come to a very good solution on.
But it does come up a lot. Yeah. I mean, I had this question in Woodstock from the neighboring football field. Tremendous amount of light, but it wasn't even in the district, but they didn't have a whole lot of purview. But again, as an historic district commission, you do have standing to bring up matters to your local legislative body or the planning commission that concern you, that they might be able to introduce legislation, not under the state enabling statute, but under your own, code of ordinances, if it is becoming, and if that floodlight is a big, huge structure, you can certainly review that. So.
Well, the issues that we have most commonly are excessive number of fixtures, lighting in the trees or uplighting in the trees, that sort of thing. And a lot of time it's because it's an older couple or whatever, older family, and they say it's for safety. They need all this light, but it's just too. We typically shoot that down and limit the number of fixtures that they can have, but it is tricky.
Well, and I mean, it is tricky, but it is something that you might be able to address in your design review guidelines, because then it would be a public document. Because I would say that
I think we do.
It does have an effect on the architectural character of the district. So you might want to just start looking at that and seeing how does this affect, what the characteristics of the district.
Is there anything also related to the lighting that you guys have come across with the temporary string lighting that has become fairly popular during the pandemic?
Oh, I have not seen anything like that, although it strikes me as maybe being a temporary, although always there thing. So again, if it's not affecting an exterior architectural feature, you probably don't have any purview over it. But this is not to say that you can't, just kind of examine all of these things and their impact and maybe provide guidance. You may not have regulatory teeth over it, but you could provide guidance as long as you explain, why this is something that's of concern to the commission. When is that, Stacy? Judy.
Sorry.
We're
Anyway,
still
yeah, I
talking
know
about
that.
lighting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we do have a section in our handbook about lighting, which I think is pretty clear, that lighting shouldn't intrude on adjacent properties, including pool lighting, stuff like that, or intense lighting is to be discouraged, spotlights. So it's pretty clear, I think, what we from our standpoint, but people, nevertheless, architects will come in asking for more, to light things up.
It's tough, but it's best to, as a commission, figure out how you want to approach it, and then so that you're always consistent and reasonable, or not reasonable, logical, or reasoned.
Yeah.
Yes, is what I'm trying to say.
We do. We try to be consistent, I guess is the optimal word there, from case to case. And like in the case of like somebody who installs columns that are not made of wood, and they do it without our approval, we have to issue a violation, and have them come in and submit an application, but they're not going to get it approved because we don't approve synthetic materials, So.
Well, yes, and this is where it is kind of a delicate balance. You don't want to, you have a
Yeah.
job, you have a purview, and it's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable, to
Right.
to deny that. And that is why, there are fines, and those fines are actually put there to help remedy a violation, financially, to fix it.
Yeah.
So, it's within your rights, but then again,
Yeah,
you-
it definitely angers people.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Right.
there's some
Especially when it's been a violation that's existed for months and we find out about it, 6 months after it's happened,
yeah.
or because the painter's painting it and all of a sudden like, oh, wait a second, comes to our attention. And, I have another question about screening. I know like we stipulate screening for condensing units and generators and things of that nature, but it's pretty clear in our guidelines that we have no purview over plantings, right? So it's sort of I think we're contradicting ourselves by saying we have no jurisdiction over plantings, and then we say that you can have this generator, but it has to be screened in perpetuity. So it's sort of how do we deal with that contradiction?
I think, well, because if someone came in and wanted to plant, 100 weeping willows, that you have no jurisdiction over whether they can do that or not. That's landscaping you
Right.
don't have purview over. However, stipulating that, a mechanical, intrusion be screened is a little different. You are asking for this screening and it's for a specific purpose, which is to cover up the appearance of the whatever it is you want to screen. So they are kind of two different things.
And this
you're right.
has a precedent. Sorry, Mary, just to
No, go ahead.
really quickly. This has a precedent in environmental review for historic preservation. So when there are visual impacts from, say, a whatever, like a road that's been changed, and there's fencing that's going to be impacting the Merritt Parkway, they would ask that fence be screened. So it's in a federal sort of way of dealing with things. So they would add vegetation to screen and lessen the visual impact to the historic resource. So that's where we kind of get that language from too.
Right. It's the commission asking for this, not a property owner wanting to, do planting, they don't need to ask you what they can plant in their yard. This is just
Right,
sort of,
right.
you know, so.
Okay. Okay. I have a couple more questions. So in a couple of applications, people come in for pools, and the pools may be elevated from the street, 10, 15 feet or whatever, just from the grade, from the street level to wherever the pool might be, the grade change may be such, even if it was, let's say, there was no change in grade, but you probably can't see the pool anyway, because it's so far away and it's flush with the grade. So in that case, we shouldn't. We have been hearing them, because people submit the application. But like Darren brought it up, why are we hearing this application for a pool when it's not even visible? The fence around it is, so that would definitely be part of that application. But the pool itself, isn't. Do you agree? Is that should we
Yeah.
not be hearing? Okay.
Yeah, a pool, I think we can agree that a pool is a structure. So if it were in the front yard or, visible, if it were visible, then yes, you would be reviewing it. If it's not visible, then, it doesn't matter if it's a pool or a playscape or a, whatever.
What if they submit an application for one? Do we still hear it, or do we say we're going to take that off the application? How do I handle that?
You can say that it doesn't require a COA. If they want to, you can still advise, you can still discuss, but it wouldn't result in voting to approve a certificate of appropriateness or not. I'm not sure, if it's not visible, I'm not sure what that discussion would entail, but that happens a lot. Sometimes
right.
Commissions actually at certain meetings look at the applications that have come in and decide if they have to be, heard or not.
During the meeting.
Or the building or whoever receives the application, as long as you're in good communication and everybody's on the same page, even wherever they're received, the person looking at it first can just say, no, this doesn't require a COA, and proceed.
So when I'm processing the application, you basically just cross it off the list if I don't think it's relevant, and remove it from the agenda, essentially. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another thing I find strange is playground equipment. People have to come in. I know these playground units are rather large. It's slides and little house and swing sets and all this stuff, but it's a temporary structure. Clearly, it doesn't have a foundation yet. Our guidelines suggest that we need to review that and approve it. And is that something that we should be approving?
Technically, yeah, it's a structure, because even if it doesn't have a foundation, it can be affixed to the ground by gravity. There have been cases, like the sculpture. I think I was in Greenwich, actually. It wasn't affixed to the ground, but it was so huge and heavy that the judge decided that it was affixed to the ground, by gravity. So
I think that was here in Southport, or
was it Southport?
Okay. But it was actually in a foundation. They had a cement foundation. Yeah.
Then it was definitely a structure. The thing is, though, if you're reviewing a playscape, is that new construction? It's not. You don't want the playscape to look like a little center chimney cape from 1650. So there comes a point when you might. Then you look at it and how it's impacting the surrounding district. If it doesn't have a negative visual impact, then again, that it really is up to you. But I think it should start. It should start with an application. I don't know, Stacy, what do you think? Have you?
Again, I think it's worth bringing it before the commission, because it is a structure that will be there probably for at least a decade, right? So it's going to impact the appearance, but it isn't affixed to the ground in most cases, and it can be cleared away in a day too. So
does it need a certificate to be removed? once you have
It could come under blanket approvals. You just want to be careful that it's not,
Right.
and I think this would happen, but you don't want it to all of a sudden have these playscapes that are towering over and visible. It
Well,
is a
location, I think,
temporary.
is definitely something that we would be interested in where it's located.
Yeah.
In some of these properties, it's, might be a corner lot and there's not a lot of place to hide it.
Yeah.
And, and in one case, it was a corner lot. And I'm not sure if it is, I'm sure it's pretty visible from, one of the main streets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I have one other question. I've always been under the impression that when it comes to painting, we don't have any jurisdiction over paint colors, but we do have jurisdiction over whether it's painted or unpainted. Is that true?
Well, yeah. Okay. Here's an example. If there's a masonry structure,
for a wood structure,
Yeah.
structure,
it depends on
not
what
masonry.
historically it was. I mean, if somebody wants to be drastic about it, if somebody wanted to paint a brick building that was not historically painted, that would be a change.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
That's I know. Yeah.
if
But wood.
Yeah, if something is historically not painted, although I don't know why it wouldn't be. We talk maybe stained or something like that. That would
Yeah,
constitute a
stained.
change. That would be a change in material. And in fact, this doesn't come up as much anymore, but this stuff called Rhino Shield was really popular for a while, and it was marketed as paint, but it wasn't paint. And so it was important that commissioners be aware that it was considered a change in material. So yes, if someone is going to paint something that is historically meant to be not painted, that would constitute, a change in material. So yeah, you would want to
Okay.
talk.
What if it's? I mean, this is coming up. A building that was stained. So it's a pretty old structure too. Home with hand split siding, shakes, and they're stained. It's a dark stain, and I think they want to stain it lighter or a different color stain because they don't like the stain color.
Then I think they can. I mean, it's the same material, right?
Yeah.
Stain and stain. It's like painting having a white house
Well,
and then
they
painting.
I think they might be changing the siding, but
That's
changing
not-
in kind
Okay.
with with wood shakes, whatever. It's not changing materials. They're just replacing old siding that's deteriorating. So
Yeah, if it's say it's like cedar shingle siding, or not cedar, but shingle siding, shake siding, whatever.
yeah,
And they're just replacing it in kind, the material in kind, that's fine. And I would imagine if stain is the historic material that's used to protect the house or color the house, then they can use stain and they could change it just as somebody could change their house from blue to white, as long as,
okay. But if they decided to paint it, it would be different.
it would be, again, it's worth a conversation. I wouldn't be, too.
Yeah, well,
And
that's why it's just
you
a
might
little
wanna-
confusing because
You might want to do
where
research.
do you draw the line?
Yeah.
I think
Because,
sorry, go ahead. But on a shingle
Stacy.
style house where, the stain is the historic, it's, it's part of the architectural feature. So it's a character defining feature, that interplay of like the stained shingle with the white siding. That's part of what makes it a certain style. It makes it the shingle style. That would be an instance where I would say that would constitute a change. If you painted that or if you changed that contrast. But other than that, I can't imagine that just changing it from a darker to a lighter stain, if you're not damaging the wood shakes by doing that, which I don't know how you would do that without damaging the wood shakes. That would
Well, I
be,
think they would be replacing the shape. They're replacing the siding to begin with, and then changing the stain color.
yeah. That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it isn't. It's sort of.
Well, as Mary said, that historically, if it had a like a dark stain, as most shingle houses did, shingle style houses did, then I personally would consider that a change. because it will really change the character of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is where it's good to do a little research and talk to people, talk to Stacy or me or somebody else at the office. If you're ever struggling with what might even seem like kind of a simple decision, but it's really not, you know. What also is helpful is to have periodic just public meetings with the property owners, just to answer their questions, just to let them know what your process is and what your thoughts are, you know, just so that things do become more of a collaborative effort and you become, you know, a resource for them and not a scary hurdle or whatever, you know. So that helps kind of alleviate some of the questions too.
Along those lines, in your presentation, you said get input from property owners. How often do you guys recommend that, for example, the commission holds meetings so that the people that live in the neighborhood get to understand everything about HGC? For example, like in the neighborhood I'm in, I want to say between 30 to 50% of the homeowners are new since the pandemic started. So how often is that something that's recommended?
Well, I think right there, I think if you're seeing a lot of applications for a new thing that you're struggling with, you should meet with homeowners as a whole, property owners. But definitely if there's been a huge turnover in ownership, and a lot of people may not even know they've moved into a locally designated district, it's really a good idea. In general, it'd be great if you could do it, you know, once a year, but if you could do it, you know, quarterly or as you're seeing, you know, turnover in ownership or just trends that you kind of need to get a grip on and talk to the property owners about what they're doing and how it's affecting the district and maybe coming up with, you know, solutions or alternatives that work for everybody. So I know once a year doesn't seem like much, but sometimes it's hard to do it even once a year, but you should.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you.
One of the other issues we come across is Belgian block, the use of Belgian block edging on the driveway or aprons. And, you know, we say in our handbook that it's inappropriate, Belgian block, but we do approve, you know, like antique cobbles, we call them, but it's really, they're not like the small little round Riverstone type cobbles you might see in the Nantucket streets. They're still sort of cut in a squarish shape, but the stone is just different in appearance than, you know, like your standard Belgian block, which is very, you know, that gray and black flecked granite.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think about how you feel about that. I mean, I feel like for us, it's like it's sort of arbitrary, and it's up to personal opinion as to what constitutes, you know, that Belgian block and what constitutes like a cobble, you know, cobblestone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do have different definitions, but and that does come under your purview because it is a combination of materials affixed to the ground. I don't know if it falls under the new parking, unless it is serving as parking. And it's new, that would come under, and that's where you can have that conversation. But if this is happening and your guidelines aren't addressing it, you might want to, you know, get together and figure out, you know, guidance, because, you know, sometimes property owners, I mean, they might pick something that they think looks good to them, but sometimes they just pick whatever is convenient, and they might appreciate, you know, some guidance from the commission, you know, just so they can, you know, make a good choice.
Yeah, typically we like to, if somebody wants to bring or put some sort of stone curbing or edging on the driveway or apron, then we like to approve the stone before they install it, you know, by saying, you know, having a sample.
Within your purview, so yeah.
We had an experience in the Collinsville Historic District with Belgian Block, and they specifically did not recommend it as well in their guidelines. And the commissioners had the owner screen it, or they would face a fine. So that's how they handled it.
There you go.
How did they do it?
They had the property owner plant evergreen bushes in front of the wall
Oh,
to screen it. So it wouldn't just be seasonally screened, it would be screened all the time. And they were going to fine them until those bushes were planted. So that's how they handled it in Collinsville.
that's tricky. Then you have to make sure that they maintain it, and you never know.
True.
The next property owner is going to take it down. They're going to say they want to see that whatever material it is and cut down the trees.
Yeah, it is tricky. But they felt that making them
Yeah.
take the wall down was too much. It was just going too far. So
And that's the other problem, people, and this happened in the Old Post Road area where Rosina lives, and it was a new homeowner who wasn't aware of regulations, and they put in the Belgian Block curbing, and didn't get caught or it wasn't addressed by us, until a year later.
mm,
And then when they came back to us, it was denied. And so now they have to rip it all out, and now they're going to redo it with a more appropriate looking stone, and to them, they probably won't even notice much of a difference, unfortunately, for most people, it's very subtle.
Yeah, that's why it's good to just make sure property owners know they're in a district and to be able to provide guidance proactively so that they make a decision they're happy with, but also, that meets your guidelines and before they invest their time and money.
Yeah. If they knew they were in a historic district.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? George, awfully quiet over there. No, you're muted. Art? No.
Yeah, Adam, this was great.
All right, well, I don't have any other questions. Rosina, any questions?
If I could just ask one more thing. So we have an application coming up in 2 weeks. And part of the application is to remove an existing garage in order to rebuild a new garage, which would be bigger in place of the one that's being removed. So do we need to give you 90 days notification for that?
If it's an original garage, if it was,
No, it's an 80s garage.
okay. Was
which
it
means
in,
it's not historically
I mean,
significant.
okay. You should still, if you're issuing a certificate of appropriateness, you should still let us know. The 90-day delay still kicks in. I don't know if there is a provision for cutting that back. I mean, generally, if I get notification, I just write back saying, we don't have the capacity to, we can't address this at this time. And then if everybody agrees, I think you could cut that 90-day. I'm not really sure. Was the
Do I
garage
just
there
email
when
you directly?
what's that? Yeah, you just email me
Do I
directly.
email you directly? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if the garage was there when the district was established, then it's subject to purview. I know that sounds really but if it wasn't, then maybe not. Well, it's still in the district. Everything's, subject. So yes, you need to send me notification.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mary. And then
Yeah.
lastly, could you send us a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I sure
That'd be
can.
really helpful for me to have to refer to.
Okay,
Thanks again. I really, really appreciate your time.
sure, our pleasure. I forget how it's getting dark earlier, so I'm like, I'm looking at my screen. I'm getting
Dark in there.
getting a little darker and darker.
Mary,
But anyway.
if you could email me the PowerPoint, I'll put it on our website. So
Okay.
Chris, you can access it from the website.
Okay,
Okay, that would be great.
Okay,
Thank you.
all righty.
okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for asking us.
All right, where's my,
And,
all right, any other business since we're here now? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second
Okay,
it.
Georgie second, Chris seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.